So our next session, as we said, we shifted from Inyane Geiros to Inyane Tzedaka, especially as we are all heading in to a season of Matanos Evyonim, Moschitim, something that obviously, and Tzedaka in general, is something that we all spend much time with in terms of the distribution and allocations of funds, and so the Rav will address that particular area.
So as Rabbanim and leaders of communities, you probably, some of the most common questions are tzedakah, and especially priorities in tzedakah. So after a brief overview, we will speak about some specific questions and dilemmas, and at our next session, or the last session, we could also bring up questions from the Rabbanim. So Minchas Osher Dvorim Simen Lamed Aleph.
Just the microphone.
Minchas Osher Chumash Dvorim Simen Lamed Aleph. There's a lengthy siman about Kedima in Tzedaka. And the problem with defining specific Piskei Halacha and guidelines in this topic is the complexity. When we ask Kedima and Tzedaka, we have not one, not two, not three, but 4 different criteria. And to put it briefly, to what to give, whom to give, how to give, and to which to give. Sounds confusing. Let me explain. To whom? Family, Aniye Icho, Aniye Eretz Yisrael, Talmidei Chachamim. So one criteria is who is most fitting to receive your tzedakah money, to what to give. Pikuach nefesh, Talmud Torah, tzedakah la'aniyim, achnosas kala, various different needs. Which need to address is levels of desperation. Mazoin, ksus, housing. Is there any priorities what you are going to give towards? And finally, how to give. And these are different areas in Shulchan Aruch. Reish Mem Tet Tet Zayin deals with various different causes. Reish Nun Aleph Siv Zayin deals with levels of desperation. How to give, Reish Mem Tes Siv Vav, and how do these different criteria interact one with another? I do not have a Mishnah's Dura answering all these questions, but we do have sources dealing with some of them. So there seems to be a machlokes between the Chassam Sofer and Rebbe Kiva Eiger. So family that needs clothing, or an unrelated oni that needs food. These are 2 scales, 2 priorities that, how do they interact? The Chassam Sofer says that the level of desperation will always override the other systems. And if there's a family that needs food for Shabbos, they would come before your family that needs assistance in buying clothes. Rebbe Kiva Eiger, Siman Reish Nun Aleph, as understood by the Chofetz Chaim and Ahavas Chesed, Perek Aleph Sivav, seems to hold no. If Aniyah Ich will come before others, then even if Aniya Echo need clothing or housing, and others need food, Aniya Echo come before. It is somewhat of a mystery why the Rambam ignores a sugya meforeshes she'eno lav choylek in Adorim Pei Aleph. And the Gemara discusses in Adorim Pei Aleph 2 towns, one next to the other. And in one town, they need water for consumption for drinking. Another town needs water for laundry, for hygiene, which comes before. And the question is, people living in a town, we have enough water to drink, but we don't have enough water for sanitary purposes. And a neighboring town is lacking water, drinking water. And the maskana is, your town comes before. Would that prove that the same would be on the personal level, not only on the communal level when we're dealing with 2 neighboring towns? And would we say, Aniya Ichu, or your family, comes before others, even though others might be in greater desperation? So this is a Gemara she'eno lav choylek, and the Rambam doesn't bring it. And it is not clear why the Rambam ignores this Gemara. So it is found in Bavli Nedorim Pei Aleph, and there's a similar sugya in the Yerushalmi, and I wrote about this extensively. And whenever I mention today, I wrote about something, I will be happy to make this available in email to the Rabbanim, because there's a limit to how much I could discuss in our time limitations. So this is one area of question. But fundamentally, I want to share with you what to me seems to be a milsa de pshita, but many others see it as a tremendous chiddush. There are 4 different sugyas in which we deal with priorities, or what comes before others. 3 of them are obligatory, and 1 is voluntary. Number 1 is the sugya at the end of Horiyas, lahachiyosoi. Who comes first? Who comes second and third? Koyanim, Leviim, Yisraelim. In this modern world, I should be afraid to say that according to Chazal, a man comes before a woman, not because he's more precious to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than a woman is, but the defining factor is who has more mitzvahs. And just like a kohen comes before Yisrael, not because the kohen is necessarily more precious to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but he has more mitzvahs. So that is one sugya in which we deal with dinei kedima. The other is kedima b'mitzvahs. Everybody is familiar with the concepts. Todio, mekudish, todio keneged mekudish. In the Bavli it's a boyed aliyevsheta. In the Yerushalmi it is b'sameyem b'silal. So the other area is kedima b'mitzvahs. Which mitzvahs come before others? Priority number 3, or sister number 3, is brachas. And these are very complex halachas. Which bracha comes before another? So the more limited the bracha is, it comes earlier. Eitz comes before Adama. Adama comes before Shahakal. And then the question would be, on what to make the bracha? Shivas Aminim comes before others. A Shlema comes before a Prusa. So the third area of priorities is brachas. Number 4 is tzedaka. The first 3 are mandatory. It does not depend on your personal feelings, whether it's kedima b'mitzvahs, kedima b'lahachyoisoi, or kedima b'brachas. Tzedaka is not binding. Tzedaka is recommendations. And people are entitled to have their own personal feelings and priorities when it comes to tzedaka. Why is that? To me, it is clear that it is what it is. The question would be why. And I think the answer should be a very simple one. So if all the Nagidim, the philanthropists in the Jewish world, would decide to give their monies to yeshivas, do not expect an ad in the Yated, in the Mishpacha, in the Hamodia. From Vadi Yeshivas, we have enough money now no more need to give money to yeshivas and start giving to hachnosas kala and to other needs. That ad will not be forthcoming. So if kedima b'tzedakah would be obligatory, aniyim would die from hunger. We wouldn't have funds for hachnosas kala, because everybody needs to give for pikuach nefesh or for Talmud Torah. So in tzedakah, it is recommendations. Chazal teach us in a Jewish society what are the most urgent needs, what comes second, what comes third. But people are entitled to have their own personal preferences. One of the greatest Gabor Tzeduk of our age was Reb Chaim Kreisvik. He was the Rav in Antwerp. And he dealt only with marrying off Yesomim and Yesomis. That was his thing, nothing else. And he said that's what the Stipler told him when he was ill, and that's what he did. And so it is legitimate. A person can have his own feelings and own priorities. And I usually tell people, a wise investor has a diverse portfolio. You don't put all your eggs into one basket, because in this volatile world of finance and of economics and investments, a wise investor has a diverse portfolio. You have some real estate, you have some stocks, you have some different things. You want to invest in a startup maybe, but so I say the same by tzedakah. Don't give all your tzedakahs to one cause or to one need. You should support Torah, you should give tzedakah la'aniyim, and do some of everything. And one of the more common questions is Aniyah Echo against Aniyah Eretz Yisrael. So it would be my personal interest to say Eretz Yisrael comes before your local communities, Talmud Torah comes before any other need, and the Minchas Osher comes before any other koilon and Eretz Yisrael. That would be my personal interest. But you need some tiny little degree of integrity. Aniyah Irchu comes before Aniyah Eretz Yisrael, because the concept of Aniyah Eretz Yisrael is not found in Chazal. Aniyah Irchu is one of the most fundamentals in Halacha. Aniyah Eretz Yisrael is a tshuva in Chasam Sofer. And the Chasam Sofer says everyone should dedicate part of their tzedakah for Eretz Yisrael. So Aniyah Irchu comes before Aniyah Eretz Yisrael. The Chasam Sofer also says Yerushalayim comes before other cities. So I have the mazel that my institutions are in Yerushalayim where I live. So number one, I know it sounds like a chiddush. In the other three areas of halacha, the priorities are binding, but not in tzedakah. And therefore in tzedakah, I advise people, and especially in this world, we all want to give to the right places. And it's so difficult or impossible really to know. And even in the days, Chazal said, in their days, thousands of years ago, boyu v'nachzik toivel eramoim. So you support a yeshiva, you don't really know how much your money is needed, or a person comes to your door collecting for Achnas Kala. Do we really know? And none of us wants or could check his credentials and show me your bank account. We all try and want to do the right thing, and that's why it would be even more important to spread out your tzedakahs. Don't put everything into one place or one need. Support Torah, support aniyim. Maisa money. And this is a huge question. So there are more paskins in Reish Mem Tesif Aleph that Maisa money should go only for aniyim and for no other need. And fundamentally that makes so much sense, because Maisa Ksofim is derived from Maser Dogon, from Maser Oni. And Maser Oni, you can't build a shul from Maser Oni. You can't even do anything from Maser Oni besides La'aniyim. And that is the definition of Maser Oni. Maser Ksofim comes from Maser Oni. So according to the Ramo, you cannot use Maser money only for Tzedakah Aniyim. The Prisha on the spot disagrees. And the Prisha says, even though Masa Oni from Dogan, from the produce of your field, should go only to Aniyim, but Maisa Ksofim is different. And are you aware that Ma'aseh Ksofim is nowhere to be found in Bavli? There's no mention of Ma'aseh Ksofim or in Yerushalmi, and it is a medrash, the entire concept of Ma'aseh Ksofim. So Chazal say Asher b'shvil shittis Asher, but that probably is Ma'aseh Dogon and not Ma'aseh Ksofim. So the Ramos says Ma'aseh should only go to Aniyim. The Prisha says it could go to any Devar mitzvah. The Pischei Teshuvah Steve Weiss quoting the Chasam Sofer, Teshuvah's Chasam Sofer Yordei Reish Lamed Aleph, and Chasam Sofer says that it depends. Did you make a neder when you decided to give Ma'aseh Ksofim? Our psak is that Ma'aseh Ksofim could be used for any tzorchei mitzvah. Binyan Beis HaKnesses, supporting the community, Tzedaka l'aniyim, Chanos Eskala, Ani Yetz Yisrael, Ani Ye'icho, Ma'aseh Ksofim could go to any Dvar Mitzvah. But it needs to be made clear, Ma'aseh Ksofim is about giving away. You can't build a sukkah for yourself for Ma'aseh money. It's a mitzvah, but it's for you. And the fundamental idea of Ma'aseh is giving Ma'aseh and not holding on to your Ma'aseh. You can't buy your own esrog for Ma'aseh. But if you build a communal sukkah and there's a need for one, then that could come out of Ma'aseh Ksofim. And the reasoning for this minhag is that most of the Achronim follow the footsteps of the Bach. And the Bach says Ma'aseh Ksofim is not a chiyuv. It's a minhag, it's a midas chasidus, and therefore usually we are makel in questions regarding Ma'aseh Ksofim. So there's a very detailed list in Simareish Memtes, as I mentioned before, the various different causes and what is the list of priorities. Number one is pikuach nefesh. What I recommend that you all give your Ma'aseh money or your congregants to hospitals. So we have here at least one Rav of a hospital, my dear Talmud, Rabbi Wiener. What I says, give all your money to Cedar Sinai. No, that never would be my suggestion, because usually hospitals and these huge institutions have other sources. And they have many sources that would not be available to a local kollel or to a Kupish Tzedaka that supports Hachnosas Kala. But as an abstract, Pikuach Nefesh is number one. Hachzokas HaTorah is number two. Number three, we already come into a machlekes, whether it's Binyan Knesses or Tzedaka La'aniyim. And this disagreement is based on a Yerushalmi, and the Yerushalmi is found twice in Shas, Shkolim Chov Beis and a Masechet Peah Daf Lamed Zayin. And the Yerushalmi tells the story, two great Amerom were working in the town of Lud in Eretz Yisrael, and one says, look at these beautiful shuls. Our forefathers gave tzedakah and they built these beautiful shuls. And he said, Kama mois eshkiu avoisenu. And the other responded, Kama nefoshois eshkiu avoisenu. Don't we have aniyim deloin bioraisa amelei Torah? And don't we have cholim aniyim, people that are ill and they need our support? This would be a waste of money building such beautiful shuls. And that's the story they told in Yerushalmi. The Maharik, Migedolei Ashkenaz, going back 600 years, the Maharik says, this proves that Amelei Torah come before Binyan Beis HaKnesses. And that's why he said, aren't there Talmidei Chacham and Amelei Torah that need our support? And there are two gerses in the Yerushalmi. Did he only say Aniyah Deluim Bioraisa, or he also said Cholim Aniyim? If he said Cholim Aniyim, that would prove that supporting the needy would also come before Binyan Beis HaKnesses. But it is only the combination of Cholim Aniyim, which would prove that if it's Aniyim Belvad, Binyan Beis HaKnesses would come before Aniyim. So this Yerushalmi is the source of discussion and argumentation. Everybody agrees number one is Atzoros Nefoshes. Number two is Achzokas HaTorah. Number three is a matter of question. And therefore I say, a wise person diversifies his tzedakahs just like he diversifies his investments. Give for Torah, give for aniyim, give for achnasas kala. And then the question is, to whom to give? Give to people you believe in, you admire what they're doing. Is one obliged to give to everyone? Fundamentally, yes. Practically, I don't know the person. And by tzedakah, you are entitled to check out. Only by matonas lavyonim do we find in Bavli and Yerushalmi, kol haposhet yad noisan loi. Ein medaktikim b'mois Purim. We would expect that halacha to be a Megillah, but it's not. It's only in Bava Metzia. Ein medaktikim b'mois Purim. But all year round, you have the right to check them out. We can check them out. And therefore, it would be advisable, give to people you trust, you admire what they're doing. I never turn a person away, and many times I shared a very personal story that happened to me. One day, a person walks into our shul and he's been coming every morning collecting. I didn't like his looks. I don't know, he looked like a crook. And he came to shul every day driving a Toyota, not a Porsche, not a Ferrari, but a decent, nice car. You know, in Etzisur, you have various cars. The most common car in the Torah community is called Subaru Avrechim. Do you know this type of car? What is unique about this car, even if you're blind, you open the door, you're aware it's a car. It has a certain smell. And before you sit down, be careful to wipe the sheet from the remnants of bamba and bisli and popcorn and, you know, a little car serving 10 little kids, Baruch Hashem, in the Torah community. So, dealing with
The Toyota.
oh yeah, so this person came every morning. I just didn't like the way he looked, and I didn't give him. And after 3 or 4 days, I said to myself, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? What are you doing? How does this person feel going around the shul and the Rav doesn't give him money? How does he feel? He thinks to himself, who would give me money if the Rav isn't giving me money? I had such a deep regret. And I said, are you crazy? Are you stupid? So you're going to give him a shekel every day? It's going to cost you 25 shekel a month? What do you care about his Toyota? What do you care? And since then, I started giving him money every day. And when I'm abroad, and I came back home, I gave him 20 shekel. He became my best friend. He's the only person walking into my shul that passed me on the back every day. And, okay. So he became my best friend. What I mean to say is that don't embarrass people. Give something to everybody that knocks on your door. But give them something. The bulk of your money you give to people you trust, you believe in, causes that you want to support. Be compassionate, be caring, be nice. Hanoisen protela oni mavorech b'shisha broches. If you're nice to him, mizborach b'yud aleph. So be aware that any person stretching out his hand is not at his best, and he is very sensitive. And be nice to each and every one of them. And I always try to do that. But the major part of your tzedakah money, you are entitled to give to causes you want to support and to people you want to support, and that is part of the priority. There are 2 important needs that are not addressed at all in halacha, and we need to decide where do they fit into the list of priorities. One is fertility. And Baruch Hashem, today we have organizations, and I think we have some Rabbanim here from Eitan, which I very much support and appreciate. Where does fertility fit into the list? And kiruv rachoikim. And the reason no major posik deal with these questions because it wasn't relevant in days of yore. So going back 500 years and even 100 years, all you could do to help people that didn't have children is saying Tehillim. And saying Tehillim doesn't require funds. And therefore, there is no source in the poskim where does fertility treatment fit into the list. And the same goes for kiruv. It is our world in the last 50 or 60 years that kiruv became a possibility. We have more Balei Tshuva coming to us in 1 month today than we had in 100 years in Europe. There was never a kiruv movement. It was always the other way around. And we were always fighting just to try to close the ranks and build walls, and because people were leaving in droves. So these two endeavors are not addressed in halacha. And I think kiruv rachoikim is the same as Talmud Torah. It's the same as Talmud Torah. It's teaching Torah. And maybe even coming before Talmud Torah, and that is because in Bov Metzia Pehei, the Gemara says, Hamalamed is ben chavayrei Torah, zoiche v'yoshe b'yeshiva shel malo. Hamalamed is ben ha'ma'oretz Torah, afiru gzar din shel shivim shone koren b'shvilo. So obviously, Chazal exalt and admire Hamalamed is ben ha'ma'oretz Torah even more than Hamalamed is ben chavayrei Torah. So supporting kiruv would be the same as Talmud Torah, and maybe even have a slight precedent over supporting a koilor. Where we put in fertility, definitely refuas acholim, not pikuach nefesh, which tops the list. But if there is anything that I would say would be korov lepikuach nefesh, it would be fertility. If Chazal say misha ein lo bonam choshev kemeis, and it is only those that chas v'sholom don't have children, or those would deal with people that are trying to conceive and to have children, it is only then that we could appreciate what it means for a married couple that don't have children. So we find in Chazal that many isurim were set aside, or chodesh she'ein b'sekona overrides amir lenochri. Chodesh she'ein b'sekona, Chazal were matar macholos asura shelo kederech achila, as we learn in Pesachim Chofei. Chodesh she'ein b'sekona isn't matar every derabonon, but we do find some derabonons, and I think helping people have children would be somewhere between chodesh she'ein b'sekona and pikuach nefesh mamish. So these two endeavors are not addressed by the poskim, but I shared with you my opinion where they fit in. I was recently asked an interesting question by Rabbi Wiener from Cedar Sinai. Could I share the question? You know, we're not saying any names, but the question was a person, a Holocaust survivor, that wanted to support the hospital, and he asked to expand the cancer ward to be able to treat more patients and more advanced treatment and more. And the hospital said we would need this money for research, because that to us we need more funds to do cancer research. And the question was, what is more important? Just expanding the ward and being able to treat more people and maybe better treatment, or investing in research? And my answer was, I don't think one has more precedent over the other. If there would be 5 cholen befonenu that we could save, and we have the funds to save 5 people that are right here and now, or we could use these funds to save 20 people in the future, my psak would be, you need to treat those that are here right now. But I don't think this is the situation. I don't know whether in a big state like California there really is a shortage in beds for cancer patients. But even if so, this is not the situation of cholev bifanenu. On the other hand, research is so essential. If not the research that we did 20, 30, 40 years ago, millions of people would be dying today, and we could only treat them and save them because we invested in research many years ago. Sometimes a certain area of research has no result, and sometimes amazing breakthroughs that'll save the world. And the entire world is waiting for some breakthroughs in cancer, and therefore I said, the donor that decided to support cancer treatment is entitled to decide whether he wants to invest in research or in expanding the word. One of the major questions regarding tzedakah in our communities is tuition. So I know that in Torah communities in America, tuition is a huge burden. And I know some families, big families, that 40% of their income just goes for tuition. So almost every major school in America has discounts for many members of the community. And a certain community, I was asked by the leaders of the community a very troubling question. There's a person that has kids in our school, and he says, I can't afford tuition. And we give him a break, we give him a discount. And then he's a big shot, and there's a dinner in town, and he has a gold page in their journal, and he gave $10,000 for a certain moisid. And we say, you're asking for a discount in tuition from our school, which means other people are giving tzedakah to support you, when you are giving so much money to support another moisid. And they say that's wrong. If you have extra money, first you should be paying tuition and not being a burden on other members of the community. And what do we say? And I definitely think you cannot ask for a discount in tuition and then, maybe I used the wrong word, I just used the word that they use when they turn to me. But you can't have the covet of being a major donor to another institution. If you have MISA money, give to the school in which your kids are learning. And that is another question. Is it legitimate to say, I can't afford tuition, but I am willing part of the tuition to give in MISA money just to enable me to feel that I'm giving MISA? So if my tuition would be $50,000, let me pay $30,000 tuition, and I'm going to give a donation to the school, $20,000, and then I could discount it deduct it from my MISA money. Would that be legitimate? For tax purposes. You know, this is tzedakah. I would have a tax break. To a certain degree, I think it is legitimate. And a person is entitled to say, I'm willing to give a donation to the school, not my full tuition, but part of it. But it definitely is fundamentally wrong to ask for a deduction in the tuition you're paying and then be able to give big monies to other institutions. If you do have extra money, and even if it's MISA money, you should be giving your money to the school that is giving you a discount, and other people will be need to pay for your chinuch of your children while you have extra money to give MISA. So if a person can't afford tuition, first of all, he's potter from MISA. He doesn't need to give MISA. But so many of us want to give MISA, even if it's not a chiyuv, because we know that it's a sgula and it's important, and that is the basis of leniency we paskin in dealing with MISA. So the reason we are lenient and say anything that has to do to mitzvah, to be part of your MISA, is just to encourage people that they should be able to have this good feeling, I am giving MISA. So it is legitimate to ask for a discount in tuition and give MISA, but there's something fundamentally wrong paying only part of your tuition, knowing that other people are paying for the chinuch of your children, and then being able to have a lot of kavod and a lot of status and giving big monies for tzedakah to other institutions. I think that is fundamentally wrong. So, after a brief introduction to the sugya of priorities in tzedakah, we dealt with a few relevant questions, which are relevant to Rabbanim, because we deal with these questions on a daily basis, and also some ha'oras, which are, not enough dealt with in various questions in tzedakah.
Is it possible between the 5 questions publicly and speaking sure that MISA is a minhag, meaning will it possibly cause Rabbanim to not give it generously? They think it's a minute, they don't think it's
I think it is always legitimate to teaching halacha in its purity and in its truth. I think most people will not stop giving Maisa, even though they know. It's a minig. I use double language. I said it's a minig and midas chasidus. It is nice, it is important, but it is not a chiyuv. And people should be aware it's not a chiyuv. Because if you're struggling with your panasa, you should not be giving Maisa. Especially if you're going to be a burden on others. So you're going to give Maisa, and then other people will need to support you, which is fundamentally flawed.
What about when young married couples, they want to start giving Meiser, but in giving Meiser, that means you're just going to have to take more from their parents?
When a person is supported by his parents, he should give Maisa, but any money that is earmarked for a certain need, if a parent gives you money to pay for your tuition, he gives you money to buy furniture, you don't need to give Maisa from that money. You can't get Maisa from that money because it was not intended for Maisa. And your parent would say, I already gave Maisa from this money. I'm not giving you this money to give Maisa. I'm giving you this money to buy a fridge or to pay for the chinuch of your children. And I think not only you're not mechuyev to give Maisa, you cannot give Maisa from the money that is designated. But if your parents just give you general support, you should give Maisa from that money. Because giving tzedaka is a need like any other need.
Parents who support their married children, they're not desperate, they're not going hungry, but that's the deal. Help out the children. So is that tzedakah money?
How do we define oni in our day and age? And this is also a topic. Actually, one of the sforim in our pipeline is a minchas on tzedakah. So if you have any questions on tzedakah, I definitely would be happy if you send them in, because you might make it into the minchas on tzedakah. So how do we define oni? It is no longer a mosayim zuz, and I think the definition of oni depends on the norms of a given society. In Israel, we have an expression, gomeret hachodesh, which means, are you finishing the month? Or in the last few days of the month, you no longer have a penny in your pocket. So the definition of a ani is every sensible person in the modern world needs to save some money. You're going to make a bar mitzvah, you're going to make a simcha, there's going to be a medical need in the family. And so it is totally legitimate to set some money aside. But many times I'm asked by a person, I'm struggling with parnasa because I'm a ben Torah, but I have $500,000 in the bank which my father has set aside for me. You can't take tzedakah if you have so much money in the bank. But if you save 50,000 shekel, and you will need far more than that for upcoming simchas, you still are entitled to receive tzedakah, to receive matzah. So if you are a man of wealth and your children are well taken care of, the money you give to your kids cannot be part of your matzah money. But if your kids are learning and they live on a stipend from the kollel, and they are definitely entitled to be part of your matzah package.
Can I shift it slightly, because in Yana Diyama, many of the Rabbanim are entrusted by members of their community for Matanos Levyonim. So how would the Rav suggest we allocate most fairly and in the most meaningful way on that?
So Matanos Levyonim definitely should be for aniyim. There's a differentiation in halacha between an ani and an evyon, and that is a sugya in Bava Metzia. Hagon Rav Moshe Sternbuch wrote in a sefer that Matanos Evyon needs to be for evyonim, and not every ani applies. And a minchas Rosh Hamoedim, I disagreed with them, and I say Megillas Esther is not a halachic source. We paskan halachas not from Megillas Esther, just like we don't paskan halachas from the Chumash. We paskan halachas from the Rambam, the Torah, and the Shulchan Aruch, and none of them mentions evyon. The Rambam, Torah, and Shulchan Aruch writes you need to give matanos L'shnei aniyim. They all speak about aniyim, not evyonim. Any oni applies. But you could give matanas evyonim for b'nei Torah. Most b'nei Torah sitting in koidel fit the criteria. You definitely could give for almonas and yesayim that need your funds. But you cannot give matanas evyonim for tzorche mitzvah. Even though Maisa, I said you could give for any Devar mitzvah, not Matonas Levyoinim. What is important in Matonas Levyoinim is Bo B'Yam. And Bo B'Yam has become not only a big challenge, almost an impossibility. So in days of yore, you lived in a shtetl. There was no means to give money elsewhere. They didn't have bit or Zell. And you know, I'm a primitive person. Person asked me lately, could I pay in bit? And I asked them, what do you mean, Bitcoin? What's bit? Is it a certain currency of a faraway country I'm not familiar with? So he had to explain how one pays in bit, which I wasn't aware of. So in days of yore, the most pushita thing was to give boy biyam. You came to shul, everybody came together for Miklas Megillah. Einayim shel aniyim nisois the Miklas Megillah. So all the Niyam came to hear the Megillah, and you gave them money, and that was Bo B'Yam was very simple. In this modern world, it's almost impossible. So you give to an organization. So, what do I do when people give me Matonas Evyoinim? And sometimes it's more money than I really want to give to the Aniyim that are in my shul. I have a list of Aniyim which I won't see al Purim. So what we usually do is zikui al yedei acherim. You know, I take an envelope with a bunch of cash, and I ask one of my married children, you know, this is the list, read the list and be zoichet to this money for them. It is a harama. It's not what Chazal had in mind, but it is a legitimate harama. Because the other problem with Matonas Levyoinim is it is clear in halacha that Matonas Levyoinim is primarily for Sudas Purim. There is no real reason a person should give tzedaka on Purim. If you have tzedaka money, you should give it as Seres Yemei Tshuva. The Rambam writes, Mina Kol Yisrael. Tshuva tzvira v'tzedaka b'avina soya gzeira. Tzedaka has nothing to do with Purim, essentially. It's about Sudas Purim. So even if you give Bo B'Yam, the average oni has his piece of fish and his bottle of wine for Purim. Oilanu, we will be very sad if all our Matonas of Yoinim is spent on Sudas Purim. We hope the Matonas of Yoinim will keep them going for Leila Seder and beyond. So the nature of this mitzvah is totally different than it was, but the halachas are the same. Those are the halachas. But the nature is different, and therefore zikui bo b'yam is legitimate, because even if you give him bo b'yam, it's not the original idea. The original idea it was, you know, give him, he should be happy on Purim, he should have what to eat on Purim. And the mitzvahs are mitzvahs, even though their nature has changed. So there is a din of bo b'yam. However, people give so much matonas avyonim, and essentially most of it is just tzedaka. So give a few dollars bo b'yam for a local ani that you could give, but all the rest is fundamentally tzedaka. So you give money to organizations, you give to gaboy tzedaka. Some of them will be dispersed bo b'yam, some of them won't. Some of them will do zikui bo b'yam, which is a legitimate harama. But give. And we all remember the Rambam. Matonas Evyonim is more important than Mishloach Monis.
When Balabatim are giving generous checks for Purim and for Pesach, like the Rav said, they're giving way more. And throughout the year, they don't necessarily give as generously in the charity fund. Is a Rav able to give out a portion of that on Purim and withhold that money so that there'll be able to be charity in the account throughout the year?
Because Balabatim are aware that their Matonas Evyonim would not really apply to the criteria of Chazal of Matonas Levyonim, maybe yes. but I do feel uncomfortable people giving matonos levyonim and holding it in a bank account and giving it out Hanukkah or Rosh Hashanah. We should encourage Barabatim to give tzedakah all year, and we should try to disperse matonos levyonim on Purim, and assuming that the recipients of matonos levyonim will understand, don't spend it all on Purim or Erev Pesach, and you are entitled to have this money going, supporting you for an extended period.
If a community usually supports the poor people in the area, and they want to build a mikvah in their area, they have a mikvah that's a half-hour walk. The ladies, Friday night, they want to walk. What comes first? Continuing to support the aniyim for Shabbos and helping them out, or to build a local mikvah?
So there's a tshuva by Moshe, and he says a mikveh comes before a koilel. And I said before, achzukas HaTorah comes before aniyim. The question is there a real need for that additional mikveh? And if the Rav and the community feels that there are women that are not going to the mikveh because it's far away, then a mikveh would be one of the most important tzarchei tzedakah a community could have. So it is always a very troubling dilemma when we need to give less to aniyim because we want to build a shul or a mikveh. We should try to maximize the tzedakahs and achieve additional funds, but by halachic definition, if there is a need for a mikveh and more women would use that mikveh, it would come before tzedakah l'aniyim.
One more question. Just, when it comes to the shul, supporting shul itself, so I know in halacha the shul is considered a chiyuv, so it's not really tzedakah, but people often confuse like tax deductions with tzedakah, and they say, well, I support my shul from my ma'aseh ksafim, and so just trying to disavow that notion at the same time as allowing shuls to survive in a tax deduction giving world. How does one convey that to balabatim? That although it may be a tax deduction, it's not necessarily a deduction from my ksafim, and does that include dinners, kol nidres, other aspects of the shul? One piece of the question, and is it also, the Rav was talking about this before, is it legitimate for a person who can't pay full tuition to have money they're setting aside for tzedakah, which they're giving back to the school in other forms throughout the year, whether it's dinner journals or whatever else it is, then really should all the money just be going to tuition because that's a chiyuv on the person?
I think it is legitimate, even if you're getting a deduction for tuition, to give tzedakah. What I said before is you can't be big nogid and have the covet of giving big monies if you're getting a deduction for. But I still think one is entitled to give other tzedakahs. And that is for many reasons. First of all, it is a social need. I have a koilel. I never asked for Yungalite from my koilel to give to our koilel. I never asked. Some Rosh HaKoilel say, I want all your Maisa money. Some would be even smarter. We pay $1,000. You're only going to get $900 because I want to help you giving Maisa, and I'm going to take off Maisa in advance. So in taxes, there are different forms of taxation. Sometimes, they take off your money and you're never going to see that money. Theoretically, it's yours, but you pay taxes. So I think we should understand, even people that are asking for a deduction have social needs. So I daven in a shul. I'm expected to support the shul. My son has a yeshiva, and I want to help my son in his endeavor. My father is being supported by Tzedaka organizations over the years, and I want to help them. That is legitimate. We cannot expect a person to give all his money for tuition, because afilo oni amispanis mitzedaka yiten mishaloi. So, and we need to be understanding and compassionate and understand every person has various different social needs in his tzedakahs. What I said before is you can't be a big, have a lot of covet and sit on the dais and have a cold page in a journal when you're not paying full tuition. but I do think we cannot expect them to give all the. As I said, I never even asked a penny from you without living in my kollel. I'm surprised that they don't understand on their own that they should be supporting the kollel, but I would expect them to, but they don't. But it's okay with me. I love them anyway.